Hello. I think. Can we start? Yeah. Good afternoon, colleagues. Warm welcome. I'm not sure whether it is good afternoon or not. It already looks like it's a morning. We have this interesting session. We have the next interesting session for the day, which is yes, blue carbon ecosystem restoration, specifically towards about the mangrove and the seagrass thing. We have two interesting speakers, one from the private sector, one from the Commonwealth. So I would request you both to take the floor. Thank you. So we'll take 45 minutes in this session, specifically towards understanding about how the blue carbon economy is going further with regards to carbon financing, carbon sequestration, all those aspects. So one of the things which, before we get into the technical aspects, my request would be to my two fellow panelists to introduce themselves. You have like 2 minutes each.
Uh, Good afternoon. I'm Pradeep Phillip from Australia, from Deloitte. I'm a partner there and I lead our economics practice. Um, we've been very interested in this whole topic of blue carbon and oceans in particular because here at COP30, we still think this notion of oceans is underrepresented in the debate on climate change. And our main argument for why we hope COP31 will be in Australia and the Pacific Islands is because we can put this right at the heart of the agenda. We know it's such an important element, not just for the environment, not just for social reasons, but because it is all about how we live and where we live. And so it's really important for us to bring an economic perspective to this debate.
Over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Suresh Yadav, and I lead the Directorate of Climate Change, Ocean, Energy, and Natural Resources in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And those of you who don't know, Commonwealth is a intergovernmental organizations, and 56 countries are member, and with 2.6 billion population of the Commonwealth family. We had very strong work on the ocean. In fact, our the last Commonwealth head of the government meeting was in Samoa in the Pacific state, and we adopted the Commonwealth APIA Ocean Declaration, which is focused on all the aspects of the oceans and addresses many of the issues which the humanity and the planet is facing. So thank you for a very interesting panel. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Suresh. Maybe just to start from our colleague, Varghese. So you come from Australia, which is one of the region which is having a good amount of resonance towards the blue carbon economy. Like if you talk about the Fiji, if you talk about PNG, or other island nations. So, what would be the innovative financing mechanisms which are like kind of conceived in the region, specifically towards the Asia Pacific, towards large scale investments in the blue carbon restoration? Maybe you could throw us some light on that.
Let me start by saying one of the things, if I just focus, for instance, on coral reefs, one of the dangers in thinking about coral reefs is we think of it purely in terms of, the fishing aspects. But actually it's the biodiversity aspects, it's the security aspects, and also reefs determine settlement. For the islands in the Pacific, reefs determine where settlement takes place. And so it's really important to think about all of these values when you think about an asset like the reef. In Australia, the world's largest living structure is the Great Barrier Reef. And one of the things we've released recently is, in some ways, an early type of analysis on the socio-economic and iconic value of the reef. Why? Because when we think about the whole finance question, the first issue is, what is this asset? You have to start to define this asset. The second is, what value do you ascribe to it? The third is then, what risks are there associated with it? And finally, who will pay? And so, in looking at the Great Barrier Reef, we've put a value of $79 billion and estimated that this reef adds around $9 billion in value add to the Australian economy, supporting 77,000 jobs. Now, as soon as we put a value on this reef, we can start to think about what enhances value, what reduces value. So the idea of restoration of the reef suddenly becomes something of value. And this is where the finance sector in particular can start to get involved, because they can start to see natural capital not like other assets where the market just sweats the asset. You start to think of these assets like human capital. What do you have to do to build the value to then get value out of it? And so this is, I think, where the direction of finance is going for us and things like the reef.
Thank you. So now move towards our colleague, next panelist. So we heard from our colleague from the Asia Pacific region on how the region is working towards, specifically towards on going on a very regional level, considering Commonwealth, which is like a pan-world kind of an organization. How you see the blue carbon related investments are panning across this part of the world or on the other part of the world, which you feel like it would be worth mentioning?
Thank you so much for this question. First, to say that we have to understand that ocean economy is a big economy. It's currently in 2000, I think 15, it was around 1.3 trillion, and 2024 it reached to around 2.4 trillion, and 2050 it's around going to be around $5 trillion economy. So I think we need to talk about these big numbers for the investors to be attractive. Investors will go in a direction where they see the market size and the opportunities. Unfortunately, that aggregated picture has not been there. Even though we say that ocean is the lifeline, ocean is the savior of the planet, but in terms of economic terms, in terms of business opportunities, that model is missing. And precisely because this model is missing, because most of the small island states are, owning a big ocean. They are the big ocean state. I call it the boss. They are the real boss of the world. But their capacity to project the ocean assets as a big investment class is missing. So the world has to see that how you can make the ocean as a big asset class for the investors to get attracted. Now, having projected that big asset picture to the investors, then you have to think of that what should be the business model for the investors to come, what could be the innovative financing models to come, and then probably it will kick-start the investment and the business activity in the some of the island states which are there. But having said that, I was reading a LinkedIn post by somebody today that many of the people for the first time in their life, and few years back myself too, got to know that the mangroves and the other related things, the carbon storage power is much more than the forest trees and the plants, maybe 20 times, 30 times, depending upon the things. So the mangroves and the seagrass, which are the real protector of the planet, they have not got the adequate attention. We do a lot of work in marine protected areas. We do a lot of work on mangroves and seagrass related work. But the monetization of that is yet to happen. So I think we need to again see that how this carbon sinking power of the ocean assets is brought to the investors. The ocean and the people around the ocean doesn't need charity. It's the business model which needs to be presented. And the moment we are able to present that business model, the instruments will develop. The instruments develop based on the market situation, not that somebody developed business model in Silicon Valley or Washington DC or London, it works. No, it has to be a grounded in the reality, taking into account what works in the Pacific, what works in the Caribbean, and then that will lead to the financial flows into that. And I'm sure that even the world has projected 5 trillion by 2050. But if we are able to get it right, I think it will be a great investment by the global communities in the ocean assets.
That is a really, really interesting point. I think one of the things that highlights that you said, sir, was that we have to be careful to ensure we don't think of the blue economy as a homogenous thing. Right? It is highly varied. And so products and services will have to be tailored to it. The point about mangroves, they are 30 to 50 times more powerful at capturing carbon than other terrestrial sinks like forests. So this is very powerful. So the type of mechanisms that we want to bring here is a different product to, for example, thinking about the reef. And so this is why for the private sector, particularly for finance, this is an open field. But what it will require is a lot more information and transparency for us to understand how to develop the right products, the type of hybrid financing systems that will emerge. But this is also the great excitement because it is an open field. It is not a homogeneous commodity.
Of those two important words, one, it has to be decentralized and the innovative financing. So how do you see, like, either it's in the Caribbean region or in the Pacific region, how the carbon markets are playing a vital role in this? Because we hear the blue carbon based carbon credit projects, they fetch one of the highest price right now in terms of the nature based solutions. Like, we have one of the example which is from the Pakistan, which gives like around $25 per ton. So do you see any other examples in the region which you guys come from?
We're seeing quite mixed results, partly because I think we haven't got enough um, information that is consistent, right? And so we are seeing carbon value prices going up and down, and I think it is going to take some time for this to settle. Uh, we are also seeing a lack of capability in the markets. We're seeing a lot of people move in and out. And I think it's going to take some time for us to build that consistency of human capability in this market to get valuations far more consistent over a period of time.
Yeah, so I would say that the carbon markets in general and carbon market, of course, in particular, are yet to see the momentum because the various issues and probably the action taken in the last COP and some decision coming from this COP will be a good way to take it forward. But even though the green forest carbon market continue to be developing, but the blue carbon market is still in a nascent stage because the availability of the technology to measure the carbon storage is still not there under the water, though it is there for the forest. You can use the satellites to measure that. So the measurement MRV, which is continue to be a very challenging thing for the investors to know that what they are investing for or what they are buying for. So I think once the technology develop, once the regulations are in place, once the integrity of the market is ensured, I'm sure that the market will see a lot of value, and that will lead to investment flows and necessary ecosystem in the countries. And that's where I see a lot of developments happening in the big ocean state which I described because of their potential, because of their biodiversity asset, because of their many other capabilities which are not there in other economies.
Speaking about the credibility, speaking about the issues, be it as an MRV or be it as a public-private partnership. So my next question will be like how the investment community is trying to work towards blending multiple financial tools which we have in front of us. to develop a robust ecosystem. Any thoughts on that?
So I think, as I said, that the market instruments follow the market, and the de-risking is something which is very important in these markets where investors see a lot of risk. So, though even though in the other places the blended finance and de-risk instruments have taken a shape, but the particularly the ocean related assets, that is still to achieve the scale, and that's where the philanthropic capital, the foundation has to play a role in putting that seed money, first stop loss money, which can be a kind of an attractive force for the private investors to come and invest into those asset class. Otherwise, as you know, that the private investors look for the return, and particularly these asset class which are still developing, not yet mature like the other one, is very difficult. I mean, in some of the places you will find that if the market size is also important, as I said, that bundling of those market size, bundling of those regional asset class is very important so that the investors see the scale and the value in those investments, and they're able to participate, derive the returns, and make that momentum and the business model as a continuous business model in those markets. There are a lot of multilateral institutions which are doing, but they have their own limitation in the capacity to deliver. And that's where I think the philanthropic capital and even the public sector capital of the governments needs to play a role, and use the private sector's MDBs, their capital in the form of guarantee or any other instrument which might be appropriate in those circumstances.
In the Pacific Islands in particular, we really suffer from this being a thin market. And so there is still a lot of critical mass to be developed. But one of the really interesting things that investors are having to learn is that, particularly in the islands, we have these assets that are deeply embedded. And so expropriating these assets is actually not a very easy thing to do, and is not the right thing to do. So there is a lot of new learning that's taking place on how to sit and listen to communities and understand traditional knowledge in order to start to think about how you value these assets and how these assets should be used appropriately, ethically, and sustainably. And I think this is an element to finance that investors are starting to learn and learn that they have to do, otherwise it's not sustainable.
Right, but like if we have to merge both the supply side as well as the demand side, how do you see the regional focus or the country level focus organized towards designing a blue carbon investment projects which has maximum number of co-benefits linked with multiple sustainable oriented aspects on the ground? Because it's a good point, it's not done in the investment cities globally, it's done locally. How the local organizations or the indigenous people or the community, they feel like how the co-benefits are going to be very much linked to this. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you. And this is what in the ocean team we have been trying to do in the Commonwealth Secretariat. We have a Blue Charter Ocean Incubator, which primarily tries to fund the community, led projects, which have multiple benefits. One in terms of engaging the society, women and the youth, and the other is bringing the real impact on the ground. So these community-led projects, which are involving the local ecosystems, create multiple benefits. So our experience has been fantastic. In the first round, we have funded a good number of Blue Charter related projects in our member countries, and we are looking forward to further scale it up to see that we are able to provide much more support to such projects which brings the multiple benefits to the society. And that's where it leads to an area where the society see the benefits that yes, this is something which is being taken care of, not that, and also it leads to a bottom-up approach, and that's where it is a bottom-up approach where society, community, young people, the students are participating. We are able to reach to a tipping point where it generates the momentum, and that's what we want to see. And you might have seen a recent report where I was also there as a panelist on the Global Tipping Point report, where the oceans health and their related things are on a challenging position. So one is that you address the some of the issues on the ocean, on the where there is a negative tipping point. But at this other side, you also focus on the issues which are generating the positive tipping point, particularly relating to renewable energy resources, battery storage, so that the you are able to act on the both the sides, both positive and the negative sides on the ocean space. Okay.
For most of our time, we often think in finance in terms of costs and benefits, and we struggle to convert benefits into co-benefits. And when investments are highly localized, co-benefits can often mean things beyond just the monetary benefit, or the benefit that is at a higher level than where that investment community is taking place. And so understanding the benefits in terms of cultural benefits, in terms of broader social benefits, um, these things are going to matter more and more as we think about this. This is why I think there is an enormous amount of investment that's still required within the investment community to understand the process here for developing and understanding assets and how to turn these, often based in traditional knowledge, into investable products.
In the investable product. So when we speak about the investable product, so I personally believe it's more than the IRR. It is the EIRR makes the biggest difference in the blue carbon thing. So speaking about the investments, speaking about the return on the investments on the thing, what sort of a technologies are getting highly penetrated, or what sort of a concepts which are highly get penetrated that can help us also to understand what's happening on the ground, like the one which you mentioned about the renewable energy technologies, or adaptation oriented technologies, or a mixture of both mitigation as well as adaptation. What sort of a thing which is going on the ground in the areas which you guys come from?
Um, at this COP, I've been meeting with some people who, for instance, are using satellite technology to better map these assets, but more than that, to measure changes in carbon. And so this I think will help us better understand the valuation process and also better the transparency that's required for us to be able to certify these things. And I think the new technology of satellite imagery and measurement, I think will make a very, very big difference here for the blue economy.
I do agree with the Pradeep that the future of this lies in the satellite and AI technology, that once you are having a lot of data, whether it's the biodiversity data, whether it's a shipping line, whether it's your cargo passing through that, this will help you in getting those pictures with the investors look in that region. And also it will bring the trust, because right now you're able to see the whole systems on your screen, that what is happening, where are the things. So I think that is very important. And also the ability of the technologies to see what is there at the bottom of the surface of the ocean bed. So right, so that also gives you a lot of picture of the ocean wealth which is lying there, and that identification, that mapping exercise will unlock a potential opportunities for investment into that. And you might have known that already a deep sea bed mining is a issue, because it's a hotly contested issue, because one is the question of creating the wealth, but the other time it's a question of restoring and maintaining the ocean eco health system. If you look at the movie Ocean, I don't know if you have seen the ocean movie by Sir Richard Attenborough, which brings very much the the activities which are happening at the bottom of the oceans, and the exploitation of those natural resources. So I think the technology, it depends that how we are going to use it, where we are going to use it, whether it is going to be used for conservation, preservation of the ocean, or for the exploitation of the ocean. There is nothing wrong in making a business model, but the sustainable business model is something which the ocean world needs, which the planet needs, which the community needs, where you can live in peace with the harmony with the ocean, not in conflict with the ocean. So that is something which is very important for the planet.
It's a nice thing, conservation or the non-conservation. So how about the restoration happens, like wherever the things got worse, like how the restoration is happening in the region and how it is like very much related with the small scale farmers or a small scale entities who perform a large amount of real impact on the ground rather than when we speak about large scale corporates getting into these kind of restoration projects. So what's the learning in this regard?
This is an area for a lot of innovation, and the nexus between researchers and communities. If I take the example of the reef, um, we're seeing a lot of restorative work now around the um, uh, what are they called? Crown of thorn starfish, and how you can start to use local communities with the research to start to reduce the impact of that. And so this will spawn a whole new set of skills, of businesses who'll be involved in restoration. But as we understand, for example, something like the reef, we will understand the impact of water runoff, of how the agricultural system uh, plays its part in the health of the reef. And through this mix, we will start to see new business opportunities emerge. And so I think this is the restoration aspects are going to be really important. As I said before, one of the things about these assets is we should think of them like human capital. What do you do to restore, to build before you generate value?
I think the global community is very much aware about the health of the oceans, and in the recent past, the world has seen the maximum highest ocean surface temperature recorded in the history of time. So it's well documented, and world is aware that if ocean dips, the coral reefs all dips, then we are at an irreversible point in the history of time. So there is a huge awareness about that, and that's why if you look at the in the UN, there is a plastic treaty negotiation which is happening at the global stage. There is a ocean conservation measures. In the beginning, I talked about Commonwealth Apia Ocean Declaration. So all the efforts which are happening at the global level, which are happening at the local level, leading to very much the restoration, conservation, and restoring the health of the ocean. And lastly, I will say that the sustainable business model, ocean needs money for these purposes. So it has to be led to a business model which is sustainable. So the way the carbon market developed, the way the people are talking about the solidarity levies for getting the shipping line tax, if it leads to more financing flows to the ocean, the funds needed for the restoration, preservations will come to those countries, because right now somebody else is exploiting the ocean, somebody else is making the profit by various ocean trade activities, business activities, but the money needed for that is not there. So I do see that some financing model emerging, and the awareness which has come will help to a large extent. Right? For example, one thing that if you look at the plastics flowing in the ocean itself, and it's a huge market. Even if you collect the plastics in a commercial way and recycle it, that itself open up a circular economy which can benefit the small island states. So these are a lot of things are happening around that, and let's hope that the business model develops, and what is the problem today becomes a solution for tomorrow for the local community, for the countries, and for the global society.
These kinds of having a interesting learning, like we had the carbon markets. With the carbon markets, we have evolved into the plastics. which is like a plastic market, which is also having plastic credits. So probably we may have something as a, we also have water credits in the past. So it could be a innovative model where all the three can get into the ocean related aspects. So speaking of that, the next point would be like we spoken about the investments, we spoken about the community. So when we have such a massive kind of a process or a massive kind of a system in place, we need to have a proper governance to be in place. So what sort of a governance related aspects has to be kept onto the ground, which will help the deployment of the blue carbon investment projects, because it's not happening in one place, it's happening on a massive area. What should be the institutional and the governance framework it has to be? Any thoughts on that?
So the governance is going to be the key, and I think it's the capacity within the government, and maybe because in most of the island states are very small, so the capacity is a challenge in that one. So the board has to see that how a regional governance or capacity can come into play and ensure that whatever is happening is a sustainable happening in that region. So I do see that, let's say for the Pacific or for the Caribbean, we do have a regional governance model and the approach. So this regional model will ensure that there is a sustainability in the governance, there is an inclusive participation, there is a participation of the local people, there is a participation of the local government. I don't see a governance model coming from the top, but I do see a governance model which takes into account the localized conditions of the respective countries and the regions to ensure that the market which are developing are taken care of. But as I said that even at the global level, that approach, that regulatory approach is missing. But I'm sure that as we pass by and post COP30, there will be a lot of development around the carbon market and particularly the carbon market, which will ensure that people are aware. And also the technology. Technology makes much easier because even if you have a governance framework, but you don't have measurement systems, measurement technology, governance is not going to work. So the governance backed by technology, governance backed by data, governance backed by verifiable facts is going to lead something which is beneficial for the business beneficial for the country, beneficial for the society. So I'm quite hopeful that the way the world has moved, I think the various articles in 2015 Paris Agreement will see the light of the day and will bring a very different kinds of innovative financial flows to some of the island states, which are big ocean states, to get some new funding, new opportunities to do more sustainable work in the ocean space.
There's not much I want to add to that except to emphasize the importance of local participation in governance. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but I think it'll help us better understand the value that can be captured. There are so many examples, particularly in the island countries, of investors coming in, for instance, and building, a hospital, okay, and not listening to the local chiefs about how that area floods on a regular basis. And, and so missing out on understanding value, I think, is the biggest loss of not having local people in governance.
That's the right thing. Like you need to have the solution on the ground based on the reality. So with that, maybe we can now move towards the real aspects of how the countries are now considering the ocean-related economy or the ocean-related mitigation or the adaptation in their latest NDC submissions. So we have like 5 minutes now. With this, maybe we can do with the last question from my side, and then we can open the floor for the colleagues. You have like 2 minutes.
I think blue economy and oceans are still completely underrepresented in the NDCs, and I think we need a concerted push about it. But the point I want to close on is this. At all of our COPs, we are starting to bring more of an economics focus and thinking about how tackling climate change will build sustainable growth. But the aspect of that I want to focus on is that it's too easy when we think about growth for the gap between the rich and the poor to get wider. We need to think about, from COPs going forward, the growth that will come from more sustainable living by building up the most vulnerable. We have to lift our island states, our small island states, in terms of economic development much, much faster than we currently are. And this is what these finance mechanisms really should be about. Right? Rather than seeing the gap widen, we need to see it narrow because we are lifting the most vulnerable of our communities up.
Thank you very much. I have my colleague Ujo, who is the head of the climate, and she works very closely with the NDCs filing and support the member countries into the NDC, related activities in the member countries. And I must say that the whole world is caught into the pledges, the submission, the monitoring, which is all fine, and then transparency, reporting, accountability. This is the great way in the governance systems, and everybody wants to show that. But the world needs action. It doesn't need that you promise and you say, oh, others say that, oh, you have not done it. Then others say, oh, you have not provided the financing. But the world is caught between these two things. Whether you look at the 2015 Paris Deal, everybody saying, oh, this is not done, this isn't reached. So that's not the time, and that's what I like in the COP30, the action zone where a lot of people are coming and talking about the actions. The world need actions, not the commitments and the pledges and then blaming each other. So I think this Brazilian COP30 is moving in a very, very positive and right direction, that no blame game. If you have to solve the problem of the planet, you have to act upon it, and act upon based on your capacity, my capacity, your capacity. So if the 8 billion people on the planet acts according to the capacity, I don't think there's any problem is too big problems. I mean, I keep saying that, look, 1.3 trillion, the COP process is talking about annually by 2035. But if you look at the Elon Musk, a loss-making company of $80 billion, he could manage to raise $1 trillion in few weeks for doing a cost investment. So it means the money is not a problem. What is the problem is that we have got into a wrong game, which is a circular game. You give it to me, I give it to you, and the world remains where it is. So whatever positive development has happened by the business model, has happened by the industry, has happened by the technology. So that's where we need to empower, look into those things to ensure that those positive tipping points emerging from the global are taken care of, and is scaled it up to solve the problems which the world is looking for.
Very good to summarize on this. Thanks so much on that. We have like 5 minutes. If there is any questions in the audience.
We have one PhD student here who works in the University of Cambridge, and she works into the ocean space and blue economy, and Uzo leads on the NDC and the transparency. So I request them to share some perspective around that.
Hi, I just have one question from Dr. Philip. It's more from the science perspective. What sort of methodological challenges you might face when running these sort of restoration projects?
I think our biggest problem is still understanding issues like biodiversity and how to value this. Right now, we are using models that are so high level. They measure raw things like carbon intensity, and that's it. But we know the true value is far more granular than that. And I think we need to find better, we need to bring together different parts of science into economic models to better value this. That's our biggest problem at the moment. At least awareness is now there. The second is we need the technical capabilities, which is why we hope people like you will start to solve that.
Hi, thank you for the mic. I'm Shekhar from Mumbai. So, what one thing that I would like to share with this esteemed audience is nobody's talking about the technology. Okay, now, like for example, every ecosystem is built with microbes. No one talks about microbes. No one talks about reviving it. We are only doing mitigation. We are only talking about measurements. Nobody's talking about the action. So fortunately, I'm into that field now. So I would like to share that with you after this. But that is something I think if we touch base, I mean, that is going to give you results. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Maro. I come from Kenya. I'm part of the youthful delegation from the Kenyan government. I also wanted to bring some uniqueness in this discussion. That whenever we talk of mangrove restoration, we only limit ourselves in areas around the ocean, and we therefore forget those areas that are within the delta. I am personally known back at home in the Kenyan as the youthful king of mangrove restoration. I have restored over 5,000 hectares, planted over 50,000 seedlings as at the moment, and I have 10,000 seedlings bed that is there. And some of the problems that I normally face is how we can unlock financing capabilities to the local communities that are within the deltas. I come from an area that has got all 9 species of mangrove, and these communities, when I go back, would only ask me a question: how possible is it that this financing would trickle down to the levels where we are? When we come to the COP, we talk of NDCs, we talk of financing, but at a global level. And I come from that local level where, marginalized communities would expect answers. And therefore, I would seek to have answers from you so that I escalate these answers back to the local communities.
It's quite interesting that you spoke before me, and let, let me let me respond to him, and then I'll also come back to the audience. So I oversee our Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. I was on my phone just speaking to our comms expert because we have a live video, working with communities in Mauritius on mangrove restoration. So and an advisor in there has supported this. So yes, this is the national advisor for Mauritius, but we have a regional advisor. Please let's speak afterwards, and we'll see how we give you tangible support. Um, this conferences are important at the global level, but yes, indeed, we have to cascade downwards. So we do have our Commonwealth Youth Program as well, and we let you connect. We do have one of our alumni here as well, so that's good. In terms of the audience, and this will be to Dr. Philip, we've seen the global 2025 NDC synthesis report, and there's some trends in there that are relevant to today's discussion as well, wherein now almost all NDCs have adaptation, conservation, restoration. So financing is also a conditionality that is still, the trend is still that most NDCs, especially from the vulnerable countries, are conditional upon receiving financing for support. And again, for adaptation, just about 2% goes to it. You keep hearing the call for private sector investment as well. So to be good to hear from you how you think we can support, and what steps are you going to take after COP, and how can we partner together as well. Thank you.
So if not much of question, maybe we can conclude the session. Thank you. So from my side, thank you so much for taking the time to join the panel. So a warm round of applause to all the colleagues. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, okay, for this.